All right then. Yeah, and again, Kieran, as you were saying, also is just if you're not talking, be on mute, prevent any background noise interference. And when you want to talk, just unmute. You can even, if you want to raise your hand and do other things like that. I might not see the screen because I have to like do my slides, but you're welcome to just raise your hand, and Kieran will just like point it out. So let's dive right into that. Okay, so today we're talking about, yes, the bright side of sharing data, some downsides as well, but I think one of the things in recent times has been quite a lot of negative sentiment to data sharing in general, with the likes of Facebook and Google collecting a lot of data, and of course you've seen this come up in the courts and all sorts of places, who's controlling them and all the other stuff. So people are getting somewhat, I'd say, unhappy about the circumstance with data, and rightfully so, but I kind of also want to point out that there are some really good points to sharing our data, and hopefully, like, as I go through this mini story, you'll kind of see what I mean. So we'll start it very simple. I think I just really want to start clearly that there's a big difference between personal and general data. I think when it comes to general data, most people don't actually really mind that we share data. This is in the example of researchers, they're sharing data all the time, but nobody really cares because they're using that to improve the boundaries of human knowledge. On the other hand, when it comes to personal data, a lot of people are a little bit more concerned, and it's kind of rightfully so, because when you really think about it, sharing data is kind of like telling a secret to your friend, and then that friend went and told everyone about it behind your back. It kind of sucks, and it's a little worse with places like Google, because they know the kind of secrets that you don't even tell your best friend. So it can seem, I'd say, a little scary at first, but there's actually quite a lot of benefits to sharing that data. And I think first to just highlight, the internet is kind of like this pile of trash. There's just so much of it, everywhere, and nobody really has the time to get through all of it by themselves. One example of this is YouTube is estimated to upload upwards of 500 hours of content every minute. That essentially means that in what's it called? In 2 days, they create enough content to last a lifetime. And a human being would not really be able to comprehend the sheer amount of data on the internet, let alone consume it. But somehow we're still able to find what interests us. And I guess the big question is how? And for that, I'd like to introduce Captain Algorithm. He's our everyday superhero. Captain Algorithm essentially helps us go through all of that trash and gives us that little bit of gold that we actually are interested in. So how does he do it? Well, simply put, algorithms are a set of instructions that help solve a problem. And the problem that developers are essentially trying to solve every day, at least on the internet, is how to give users what they want. Unfortunately, like money, algorithms don't grow on trees as much as we would like it to. They're created by people and engineers, and the building blocks for them, well, yeah, you guessed it, it's data. So when it comes to our personal usage on the internet, the most relevant data to help developers or people that build algorithms create useful algorithms would actually be your personal data. And the thing about algorithms is more equals better. So most algorithms these days are based upon the principles of machine learning, and more specifically deep learning, I think, is the most prevalent in the industry. Without boring everyone too much, I'd say machine learning is a branch of artificial intelligence that tries to imitate the way humans learn. And deep learning especially eliminates the needs for humans to be part of that learning process. For algorithms to learn, much like a human being, they need lots of information. You can kind of think of it this way. We pump in tons and tons of data, the more the merrier, and this machine learning algorithm, also known as Patrick Star, will learn from it. There are a few more technicalities in between, but let's just call it a magic box that outputs a model that solves all of our problems. These models are then used to determine how we funnel data into every individual user. giving them the content that they desire without overwhelming them in the sea of information that's kind of building up the entire internet. So, kind of jumping into 2020, the pandemic, I think more and more of people's lives, well, everyone's lives were affected by this. But what that's meant is more people have turned to screens and, more importantly, the internet to solve a majority of their problems. This means more data than ever is being put online. So, what does that actually mean for yourself as an individual user? We're definitely getting studied a lot better. The algorithms are getting smarter. So the internet's going to become even more personalized than it's ever been, which it's not terrible. I'm not really complaining about that. But let's look at a more direct, real-world impacting case of data sharing. I think everyone in some way or other has come across contact tracing. It's one of the tools that's been used to deal with COVID-19. By sharing our data of where and when we've been to places, we're able to identify if we have come into contact with a COVID cluster. This allows us for quick and targeted measures to prevent the spread of the virus. The countries that have successfully implemented good contact tracing models actually prevented massive outbreaks and essentially avoided major lockdowns without overwhelming their healthcare infrastructure. You can look at countries like Korea, Taiwan. And contact tracing has only really been possible because we were willing to share our personal data, where we've been. Now the lingering question that I imagine you all have is, after all that, this data has been collected, what next? I assume COVID will end, at least I hope it'll end. But the data collected by governments or institutes are going to outlive us. So what happens to all of that data? Governments have access to more personal movement data than ever before. Essentially, Big Brother is really watching over us. It would be very easy for governments to use some of that data, put it through a magic box again, and create a model to find out about each and every citizen, like where are we going, when are we going there, and potentially even the reasons for it. And that's a lot of information to give to Big Brother, and I'll let your imaginations kind of wonder at the possibilities of what they could do with that. But if you really think about it, that same data could also tell people where movement is actually happening. This could help build the right infrastructure and transportation networks to help reduce traffics and waiting times. It could also be used to optimize your city planning, even creating housing in the right places for the right people, and the list kind of goes on. So when it comes down to it, there's no real, data can be used for good and for bad. Even with the same data, you can use it in a multitude of ways. But when it really comes down to it, data collection and analytics are just tools. In the hands of the right person, it could bring unprecedented benefits to our society, or it could be the downfall of us all. I believe it's important to understand the value of our data and then work with these algorithm builders to maximize the potential of the data we have to offer with full transparency. That way, when we do share our data, we'd no longer be afraid. There are lots of movements coming about. One very big one that I know of is #OwnYourOwnData. And this is really empowering the users to understand a little bit more about what your data is and what its value, what value it can bring. And because of this, more and more companies are actually increasing their transparency and access to data on their platforms. If you look at a lot of especially in, you say, Europe, with GDPR compliances, you actually can specify what kind of data you're willing to share. You can even see where your data is being shared on Facebook and a few other places. And this gives each user a lot more control on where their data is going. And with some platforms even allowing you to specify what type of data you want to share. So it's kind of the right step in the direction of democratizing data. We even see some companies are offering solutions where you can make money off your own data. So be part of the whole ecosystem, right? Instead of them profiting entirely on your data, you can choose to sell your data to these companies to make money off of it, essentially being a shareholder in that data that's already online. So I don't really want to go too much into it. I kind of wanted to just introduce the topic a little bit and really just leave it to the floor, because there's a question that I just want to ask to everybody. How do you feel about personal data collection and what they're doing with all of that data? So that's it from me. Thanks you guys for listening. I hope it was not too long. And I just kind of want to let it to Kieran maybe to take over and start going on with the session.